Welcome to The Fully Mindful, where we explore what it means to live with intention, creativity, authenticity, and connection. I'm your host, Melissa Chareau, mindfulness and breathwork facilitator, neurodivergent lawyer and coach, and fellow human navigating this wild and beautiful ride we call life. On this podcast, we dive deep with interviews featuring inspiring guests, share solo mini episodes packed with guided mindfulness practices to help you center and thrive, and mix things up with tangents and sidebars, where my friend and fellow podcaster Debbie Harrell from the New World Normal joins me for some real, random, and meaningful conversations. So if you're ready to pause, reflect, and expand, you're in the right place. Let's get fully mindful. Well, hello, everyone. This is Melissa Chareau with The Fully Mindful. I'm excited to have Sarah Clark here today. She's a non-toxic living consultant who's passionate about helping people reduce their exposure to so many everyday toxins found in our homes, food, and personal care products. Has a really interesting journey, and she does this important work which has helped shape her roles as a mother. She's also a former TV news reporter, a breast cancer survivor, and she has dedicated herself to educating others, all of us, on how to make safer choices without feeling overwhelmed. Key piece there. And I'm very happy to dive deeper into her story and the wisdom that she has to share with us today. So thanks for being here today, Sarah.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to share in any way I can of helping people switch to a lower toxic living, and happy to have this conversation.
I'm glad that we were finally able to make this happen and appreciate your flexibility around making it happen. So that says a lot about how you operate. So thank you.
You're welcome.
So maybe you could start off by telling us a little bit what your journey was. You know, you've been a TV news reporter, now you're a mom, you are a non-toxic living consultant. Like, how did you get here?
Yes. Prior to having kids, I was in TV news. I worked as a reporter, did weather, did traffic, was writing scripts, things like that. And I think one of the things I absolutely loved about that industry is just sharing people's stories, sharing information that needed to get out there to people, especially even doing weather, like that affects all of us every day. And same with traffic. You know, you need to know if there's traffic on your way to work or whatever. And I think that just has always stuck with me of helping people and wanting to tell their stories. And when I learn something, I can't unlearn it. And so what I learned about all of these things that we're faced with, like environmental exposures to toxins and things like that, a lot of it is out of our control, like what's outside of our house. Like we can't necessarily breathe the air that we're breathing when we walk down the street or the water we're drinking in a restaurant, but we can control what we're bringing into our own home and things like that. And there's just a lot we're exposed to these days. So I think my previous career being in media, it kind of helped that, helped me wanted to continue to share that kind of thing with people.
Less people think that, TV reporting, even on the weather, is not fraught with peril. I just read a really interesting story from a meteorologist who was talking about all the threats that actually weather reporters and meteorologists were getting because people don't like the weather or they've politicized it or what have you. And it's just fascinating to me that even something, which to the layperson just seems like, oh, it's the weather, super important. Yes, they're not always going to get it right, but they mostly do. And then you suddenly realize people are getting threatened by this. I don't know if that ever happened to you, total aside.
No, I mean, it's an interesting thing to watch. And I have a lot of friends that are still in media, and it's kind of scary actually to see like people are there to report what is actually happening. They're being the eyes and the ears of people. And so that is the truth of what is happening. You can't control, if a hurricane's headed your way or if it's going to rain for 2 weeks straight and you don't like that. You can't control that. The weather is what it is. And so it's going to do what it wants. And, even people get mad at the models. I mean, this is a totally tangent story, but, they get mad, but you do the best you can. You don't really know until it's on you. And,
Right.
It's an interesting thing, but it is worrisome sometimes to have, friends still out there that I'm like, this is all they're doing is reporting what's happening. So
just reporting the facts and yet it can get very politicized. That's a different kind of toxicity that maybe we can get into a little bit more later, but a little bit of a tangent there. Sorry.
For sure.
Yeah, so I mean, so you were saying that your experience in media helped you transition or develop into this non-toxic living consultant. Like how did that happen? What about
Yeah,
the media experience made you do that?
I mean, it's probably not necessarily like because of I was in this role, this is what happened. It's kind of probably becoming a mother more than anything, really.
Mhm.
I would say just my from what I learned, through my education and through working in media is just that I do like to make people aware of what's going on. And
Mhm.
that comes from that. And so that's when I learned about what's going on, like in the beauty industry and even what happens with food and all of that. It's like I said, I can't unlearn that. When I learn something, I'm like, oh my gosh. And especially if there's something that I feel like that information can really help people, I want to share that. So I would say my journey towards this non toxic living started when I became a mom.
Mhm.
And my son had really sensitive skin, and I was looking for products that wouldn't irritate his skin, really. Like I was buying things that said safe, natural, all the baby washes and the lotions and all the things. And his skin just kept reacting to things. He has eczema. And I soon learned, I just couldn't figure it out. I was shopping everywhere, like everywhere. And I learned through a friend that shared about a brand with me that there's a lack of regulation in the beauty industry in the United States that companies can really say whatever they want on the front of labels, on the front of
Right.
products. So they can say safe, natural, organic, even, and it may or may not be. And it's up to the consumer to do the research on that. And so it made sense then because I was like, oh, okay. So these sensitive skin products that I was using on my young child, they probably weren't safe at all. They had things like fragrance and other things that were irritating his skin. And so once I learned that, I was like, oh, well, this isn't okay. I want to be a part of changing this and letting people know that just because it's on the shelf in the United States, it doesn't mean it's safe. Like as far as our shampoo, our anything, I mean, makeup, all the stuff, deodorant, because of this lack of regulation, the laws are getting they're becoming a little bit more strict, but there's still a long way to go. There was a law passed in 2022 that updates the Modernization of Cosmetics Act, but the previous law that they were working off of federally was from 1938. So we were way behind as
Wow.
far as, what products are allowed and not allowed in the United States. And so when I learned that, I was mad. And then I was like, this shouldn't be on us, the consumer, to do the
Mhm.
research on this. And there are known ingredients that are linked to health issues, linked to things like cancer and asthma and eczema and allergies and on and on and on that are knowingly put into these products. And so that part made me really, really mad. And so I was like, okay, people need to know about this. And I want to help be part of the solution on this. I live in California. I've had a chance to be part of some advocacy days at the state capitol
Mhm.
to help push some of these laws along on the state level. And I'm passionate about that. I'm passionate about, safer personal care products. And it's something that affects all of us. It's not just something for women because they wear makeup typically. It affects all of us. It's deodorant, it's toothpaste, it's shampoo, lotion, all of that. So men are using it too, kids are using it too, lip balm, all those things. So that started my journey into
Mhm.
like, hang on, like, why is this on us to do the research to find these safer products?
That makes sense because, if anyone who's looked at any sort of label that is available and it'll say something like natural or organic, etc. But then you look at ingredients and there are all these words, scientific words, that unless you have a master's in like biochem or something, there's no way you're going to know that. And especially if you're standing in the aisle of the pharmacy or the Target or your local grocery store and know what these things are and how they can harm you. And it seems outrageous that these things could be on the shelf and yet cause harm. I mean, I guess there's, on the sort of devil's advocate side is if it does cause harm, people can always sue the company, et cetera. But
Right.
that also that really puts the onus on the user to first suffer the harm and then to do something about it, right? Up against these ginormous corporations, typically, not always, but typically,
And
right? So,
companies really, they don't have to prove that the ingredients they're using are safe before they go to market. And that's the thing in the personal care industry, beauty industry. And that was like, what? Like, what do
Yeah.
you mean? And in the United States, there's only about 30 ingredients that are banned or restricted in personal care and beauty products. Canada is about 600 to 700 ingredients. European Union is about 1,400 plus. So the United States is very far behind in getting some of these ingredients out. And something that also really frustrated me was that a lot of these companies are American-based companies will formulate differently overseas than they will here. So they know how to do it. It's because it's not required here. They don't have to.
Mm-hmm.
And that part really made me mad too. And so it's just more of telling people, like, just read the labels, look for
Mm-hmm.
things that say parabens or phthalates and avoid those. But things are hidden in the word fragrance, which is a
Mm-hmm.
big one as well, because companies don't have to disclose what is in actual fragrance. They call it trade secrets. So they don't have to say what it is. And so they could slip any amount of ingredients in there. Like the whole rest of the product could be totally safe ingredients. And then they throw the word fragrance in there and who knows what's hiding in there. So things like that are really important to avoid because they are known to be endocrine disruptors and can cause like health issues. I mean, even sunscreen, for instance, has things like oxybenzone and avobenzone that are typically used in sunscreens. They're banned now in Hawaii because they're bleaching the coral reefs and harming sea life. And
Mm-hmm.
so if that's happening to the sea life, what is it doing to us if we're putting that on our bodies? So for sunscreen, it's best to choose ones that are zinc based and things like
Mm-hmm.
that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point about the Hawaiian reefs, particularly since by the time it gets into the water, it is very diffuse. And
Mm-hmm.
yet it is still causing that issue for those coral reefs and the fish life. And I wonder, I mean, maybe you can opine on this. Is it really just a matter of capitalism? I think you were kind of getting at there. A lot of these companies know how to formulate their products for the European market, let's say, which I think
Mm-hmm.
you said had something like 1,400 banned um,
Right.
ingredients versus 30 in the US. So is that the issue, or what do you think the issue is?
I mean, some of it I think goes back to how the laws were written. Like people often blame the FDA and they're like, oh, they haven't done anything about it. But truthfully, the way that the laws were written, it didn't give the FDA much authority over personal care products. When it comes to personal care products and beauty products, even if something was found up until recently, they now do have the ability to recall some products. But up until just a few years ago, even if there was a product that knowingly was causing harm to people, the FDA didn't have any authority to pull that off the shelves. It was up to the company to do that. And a lot of companies just wouldn't. And so it's kind of put on the consumer like wild, wild west out there of like, okay, good luck out there. Hope you can find some products that aren't going to harm you. Not to say that everything out there is bad, but there are some known ingredients in our products that are allowed that are known to cause health issues. And so some of it comes down to it's probably cheaper manufacturing. I don't know the full ins and outs of why these companies are making these decisions, other than the fact that no one's really required them to clean up their act. And
Right.
so it's probably cheaper to do that. Sometimes I hear people say, like, okay, you want to go chemical free, which is not a thing because
Right.
everything's a chemical. Water's a chemical. And so you can't just say like I'm only using products chemical free because that's not the right term to do that. I get what people mean. But also you need to have preservatives in products because unless you're keeping it in the refrigerator or using it within 3 days, you have to have preservatives in something that has water or all of these different ingredients so that it doesn't get moldy and bad. So preservatives, there are safe preservatives out there and they're necessary. It's just a matter of finding the ones that don't cause any health issues.
I recall a time when I took a class in how to make some organic self beauty products. And I remember that exactly. I made some face cream or something. I don't even remember what. And first of all, it was absolutely the wrong texture. Second of all, it went bad in 2 or 3 days. So
Right. Right.
it wasn't sustainable for me to continue. I mean, maybe it is for some people, and all the more power to the
Yeah,
people who
for
can make
sure.
their own safe
For sure.
products. But for those of us who can't make our own safe products, do you have, any recommendations about what absolutely to avoid?
I mean, I would say things that say parabens, things
Hmm.
that say fragrance. And that's a tricky one. I have a teenage daughter, so she likes things to smell good. And a lot
Hmm.
of people do, but look for products that have like an essential oil it's as fragrance. and that it's actually spelled out. You want to see every single ingredient in there. And it may not be that you understand what those ingredients are, because a lot of them are the scientific names for things. I don't by any means know what every single ingredient means. I just know what to look out for.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's all sorts of things. Formaldehyde, you don't want, there's things that are like coal tar or carbon black. So you just want to be aware of starting to read those labels. There's a great app and a website browser like extension that's called Cleria. It's Clearya, and it will scan the ingredients that are in there and then give you, hey, this is safe. Like you can even use it when you're shopping on Amazon, or, you can scan a barcode, if you're standing in Target or wherever, and it will say, these are the ingredients of concern. These are all good, and that kind of thing. So it's a helpful tool.
Let's take a quick break.
Hey everybody, this is Melissa with the Fully Mindful. It's the new year, and I bet you're feeling the need to unlock your full potential and embrace empowerment, or maybe something completely different. Well, I'm excited to offer a new program with one-on-one breathwork and coaching sessions. We'll embark on a truly transformative journey of self-discovery, combining conscious, connected breathwork and embodiment coaching, and more. So contact me, Melissa, at the Fully Mindful, for your transformative session today. That is super helpful, because unless you're some sort of scientist with an advanced degree, I'm not sure how we're supposed to know what these chemicals are. It's like, it's great that they put it on the label, fantastic, but what does it mean? And just going back to, you were talking about having a teenage daughter. I too have a teenage daughter, and yeah, she likes things to smell good. And so do I. I mean, we all like the way things smell, and and some of these products will smell, I guess I'm going to put it in air quotes here, natural. I don't know, whatever that means. And so I had no idea. This is new for me about fragrance, that they don't have to list all the ingredients. Probably the ones that do are probably the ones doing it right, I would guess.
Yes. The ones that are very I'm all about transparency. So the brands that are very transparent are the ones that I'm going to gravitate towards and what I prefer. With my daughter, I have this, like, it's an ongoing thing, and she can drive and buy her own products and things like that. So I just try to share, like, this is the information, and, at some point she can choose what she wants to do. But what I'm purchasing is going to be safe for her. And Sephora and Ulta both have like clean lines. So you can kind of use that as a guide. It may not be the most perfect, perfectly 100% clean products, but they're much, much better. So those are good guardrails. Like, hey, these are the brands that are, safer. She'll say, hey, I want this. I'll show her what to look out for. Like, oh, this one's great. Oh, this one has, such and such, and let's skip that one. And then things like, if it's something that's, what I usually say to people is, if it's staying on your body all day long, or you're reapplying it, you want to really think about that. So our skin's our largest organ. So it absorbs what we're putting on our skin. And if you have body lotion on all day and you're reapplying it, or hand lotion, make sure those are safer, or things you put on your lips that you're ingesting. But if it's shampoo that's running off, or body wash that's running off you, maybe, that can be your compromise to not worry about that so much.
Right. Because I think one of the things that you talk about is how to do this and not be overwhelmed. Right. And so, I mean, with food labels, it's a little bit easier in the sense of, you can look at the ingredients and you recognize, if you don't recognize them, it's probably not good for you to eat. I mean, that's not always true, but it's by and large the case. Or if it has more than, 10 ingredients or whatever, it's probably not.
Yeah, you want real ingredients. You
want actual real food, but it's a little bit harder with beauty products, and then we'll get into home products as well. A little bit harder because those do tend to have scientific names. And so it's not so easy to just say, okay, that's bad, because who knows? Maybe it's not. Maybe it's just the scientific name for, I don't know, some sort of clean emulsifier.
Exactly. That's what gets tricky is, something that is some, real ingredient, but they use the scientific name. So it makes it sound like, what is this? Or maybe I shouldn't use it. And then it's a totally safe ingredient. So that's why things like that Cleria app or extension can help. Things like the Campaign for Safe Cosmetics. They have a great website. So it's possible. And kind of what I do is, once I find brands that I really like, I just stick with that pretty much.
Yeah, that's a really good tip. Yeah.
And try to trust that brand entirely. And that's not always easy either, because sometimes there's products in some of those brands that are totally fine and others have some questionable ingredients. So, it takes some learning. What I often say as well is once you learn this information, don't feel like you have to just go throw everything out and start all over, because that's not financially feasible usually or practical. So as you're running out of something, as you use it up, then choose something safer the next time. So if you're running out of deodorant or whatever, the next time you purchase it, make sure that one is a safer one.
And the other thing that you mentioned is this really isn't just for women or young women or girls, because especially now more than ever, there are more men's products out there. I mean, I think the industry finally figured out they can market to men.
Right.
Lots of hair products. My husband's a French dude, he's all over it, right?
Yeah.
Face products, hair products, the whole thing. So this is something that men need to be aware of as well. I don't know if there's a sense that you have a sense that men are more or less aware than women about this. I suspect probably somewhat less, just because this is newer to them. Is that your take?
Yeah. I think men are definitely not, my husband kind of uses what I buy and what is sitting in front of him. And so, sometimes he'll buy his own things. And I often will say, hey, just FYI, maybe this one isn't the best. But I think hopefully as the knowledge becomes more and more, typically women are the ones that are doing the purchasing of products like that. But hopefully as the awareness is out there more, that will help drive men to make those safer choices as well, and companies to offer more of those safer options for everybody, because it isn't just a female problem. There's the fertility rates are changing both for men and women, and it's not great. It's not good news. And so there are a lot of endocrine disruptors and hormone disruptors in these products that are known, like parabens, are causing issues. And so the more we can reduce exposure to that is going to be helpful in the long run.
Yeah. And I also wanted to point out, or have you point out or answer, if something is more expensive, does that necessarily mean it's safe?
No, not necessarily. Not at all. Mm-mm.
So even the products that you're really spending your hard-earned money on can also be unsafe.
Absolutely. And there's ways to find even ones that are a little more like inexpensive that are totally safe too. I mean, using coconut oil on a lot of things is great. Like some people use it strictly as their lotion or on dry spots, and that's relatively inexpensive. So it doesn't have to be like expensive to use safer products. And what I've found is a lot of the products that I use last a lot longer than if I was using just a cheaper shampoo or something that I'm buying at Target. And so it does take a little work, but I think that app can really help. And like I said, the Campaign for Safe Cosmetics has a great way to look for things too. So that's kind of where I started with that whole journey of being aware. And once I've started on this path with my kids, I was spending hours reading ingredients for sunscreen and things like that. And back then, all of the zinc-based sunscreens were, pasty white. And my kids were like, no, but now they're much better. They rub in easily and all of that. You can find all sorts of, good products that way. So once I was, focusing on them and cleaning up the products I was using on them, I was kind of like, well, what about me? Like, what am I using every single day? And then I started down that path as well.
And then it's not just the products that we use on ourselves. I know you're interested in home products as well, right?
Yes. So that started once I was diagnosed with breast cancer almost 7 years ago. And that led me into looking at more of the environmental aspects of things. So I already knew this about, clean beauty products. And really, up until my diagnosis, it had only been a few years that I'd been using these cleaner products. So up until, I was diagnosed at 42. And so, up until, for 37 years or whatever, I was using all these ingredients and products that had all these, good smelling, whatever, strong smelling things and all that stuff. So once I was diagnosed with breast cancer, I realized that there wasn't a whole lot of talk about environmental impacts on our health. And so I wanted to look into that more. I took a lot of classes and studied this, and I wanted to try to help people reduce their toxic load in their home and on their bodies, in their food, so that they can either help prevent health issues from happening, or if they are either going through a health challenge or have been through one, that they can help lessen that toxic load on their bodies to then have a healthier life.
Yes. And I'm sorry that you had to experience what it's like to be among the millions of women who have had breast cancer. I'm hoping that you're 100% in remission and it has not returned.
Yep. As far as I know, all good. Yeah.
Yeah, good.
Yep.
Yeah, and the thing that you said, I mean, it's so important. Unfortunately, these industries have left it up to the consumers to sort this out, but there is a lot we can do.
Yep.
So, and you're an example of that. You know, you were already doing things before your diagnosis, and then it took on a whole new level of import after your diagnosis, I imagine.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, what did you learn about home products when you started looking at that and other environmental toxins?
Just that we are exposed to a whole lot. And that's a whole other thing that can get really overwhelming for people because there's things that are in our furniture, like flame retardants and things like that, that are, laws that were passed decades ago to help prevent furniture from catching on fire. Well, these PFAS chemicals, they're called forever chemicals, and they are in the pans that you're using in the kitchen. They're in the stain proof anything that you use on fabric or whatever. Those are forever chemicals. And so those are building up in us. Everybody has these levels of chemicals nowadays. It's impossible to escape it. So reducing that exposure to that is a really big thing. I mean, nonstick pans are amazingly easy, but you're being exposed to these chemicals every single time you use them. And if there's a scratch on them at all, that is releasing thousands of chemicals, and then you're eating that. So really avoiding things like that is really key. And so what I learned through my whole breast cancer journey, and I had 8 rounds of chemotherapy and 20 radiation treatments and a few surgeries. And I realized through that, there was a whole lot of talk about diet and exercise, which obviously is important, but then this whole environmental piece was kind of missed. And so that's what I will set out to do, was help people lessen their exposures to things like that. Again, that you can control inside your home. I don't worry about it when I'm outside so much because I can't control that. I'm not going to worry about it at a restaurant, but in my own home, I'm going to make those healthier choices that I can and reduce exposures wherever I can to any chemicals I don't need to be exposed to.
And that's fascinating and equally troubling that, yes, of course, diet and exercise are going to be beneficial for avoiding or getting better from a diagnosis. But the fact that environmental toxins aren't mentioned at all is really quite shocking, right?
I didn't see anything, and I still haven't seen anything. And my journey started about 7 years ago because a lump showed up 7 years ago. And so I've been in this breast cancer world for almost, about 6.5 years or so until my official diagnosis. So yeah, I haven't really seen much talk about it. It's slowly coming out. I mean, there's definitely talk about the personal care products and beauty products when linked to cancer and things like that, but the rest, not so much.
As I said, that's kind of shocking. So this can feel a little bit overwhelming here, right? Especially for those of us who have kids, and I no longer have a small child, but those of us who have small children and are really inundated with a lot of things that we have to do on a daily basis. Not that, if you don't have children or when your children are older, you don't have a lot of stuff to do. We all do, but it's especially busy those times when we have small children. So what are some everyday things that we can do that you would recommend so that we're not overwhelmed, but we can make good choices?
So I would say things like making sure the air that you're breathing in your house is safe and as clean as possible. Like air purifiers are a good possibility, especially during wildfire season, which is a thing on the West Coast. Open up your doors and windows, maybe even in the morning when it's cold and getting into winter, just to circulate that air. One of the courses that I was taking talked about that and how now our homes are so energy efficient that it blocks out everything, which is great from an energy standpoint, but there's also not that exchange of air that you need. So unless you live somewhere where there's chemicals being sprayed on crops, or you're near a really busy highway and the air isn't the best to breathe in anyway, open those windows, switch to those nonstick pans, even if it's not feasible to get rid of them all. Maybe swap out the 1 or 2 pans you use the most, maybe 1 pot and maybe 1 skillet or something like that, so that you're reducing that exposure. Getting rid of plastic. Plastic's a hard one because it's everywhere and it's impossible to avoid entirely. That's just not going to ever be a thing. But especially for your kids or for us, definitely don't heat up plastic. Don't put it in the microwave. You need to hand wash it. Don't put it in the dishwasher. I know when my kids were young, there weren't a whole lot of options other than plastic for their cups and their plates. I think now there are more stainless steel and things like that. Trying to reduce that exposure. Using glass for food storage is big. If you're storing leftovers, use glass instead. And it doesn't have to be, you don't have to go out and buy all these expensive sets. You can use, a mason jar or reuse a spaghetti sauce jar or whatever you happen to have on hand. And the good thing with glass is that it lasts forever. So glass storage containers, even if you drop it, they're pretty sturdy. They won't likely break. But, ones I've bought 5 years ago, I still have, they're still going strong. So you don't have to replace them as often. So things like that, skipping the candles in the home, and people don't like that part at all because they smell good and people like that. But the things that you're breathing in are pretty toxic. And especially if there's any respiratory issues at all, if there's any asthma, we haven't used candles, like traditional candles, probably in, 15, 20 years. And beeswax candles.
I was going to say beeswax
candles are great. Yeah. They're really great. And they do have some scented ones, even some really good high quality beeswax candles. You want to have the cotton wicks because some of the wicks contain lead. So that's not good either. So, but there are options out there. And that's the thing. It's just making those switches, and then cleaning products as well. Think about that. Like heavily fragranced cleaning products aren't great to breathe in. And you can kind of get back to doing things how they used to be and use vinegar and baking soda and water to clean. Put them in a spray bottle and it's great. I love the Force of Nature. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's a brand called Force of Nature, and it's just this really clean smelling brand. It's kind of a disinfectant, but instead of bleach, it's amazing. And there's all sorts of ways to help clean up the home environment and clean up that, taking your shoes off at the door so you're not tracking in different things you're exposed to outside.
What would you recommend for those of us who, for example, might have a partner or maybe a child, a teenage or older child who just is very used to the products that they use and in fact doesn't believe that any of the natural products actually, I'm going to put it in air quotes, work? Right. Any suggestions for how to communicate, cajole, persuade these people in our lives?
Well, the teenager part is tricky because I feel they kind of just go along. But I try to have these conversations with my kids, and they, I feel like even starting to see people on TikTok or Instagram that are talking about this kind of stuff, I feel like that really is always key for them. So maybe find those people that can really get through. Like my daughter will be like, "Did you know?" I'm like, "Yeah, I've been saying that for a decade or two."
But some TikTok person just said it yesterday. So
absolutely. There are actually some really great documentaries that you can find. One's called, I think it's called Toxic Beauty, maybe, or Not So Pretty. There's a couple of them out there. And I probably should have my kids watch it and just be like, look, this isn't information I'm making up. Like there's data, there's studies, there's all of this stuff on this. This isn't just like made up information. And as far as a spouse goes, I'm not their parent. I can't necessarily control that. And even my kids now are 17 and 20. I don't have much control about that either. But since I'm the one typically doing the purchases, what I'm choosing to purchase is safer things. So, maybe my husband likes dryer sheets, for instance. I don't use them at all. My kids don't use them at all. We use the wool dryer balls typically for our things. So I found a brand that is a safer dryer sheet. Do I want to use it? Not so much. Does he? Absolutely. So find that compromise, maybe go the middle ground. Okay, maybe you want to still use Windex. Okay, find the one that doesn't have ammonia, that is maybe vinegar based, and then ease into it kind of thing,
Right.
I feel like that what happens a lot of times. And that's kind of what I'm aiming to do too. It happens a lot in these non-toxic living worlds. It's kind of like this full extreme of you can only use these 100% natural, but there's a middle. And a lot of times people aren't going to go from using these conventional products they've always used to the full extreme of the more natural things. So there's got to be a middle. And so I feel like a lot of times people will just say, I can't do that, so I just won't do it at all. So there are ways to make that journey happen.
Right. One thing I wanted to go back to, and it's personal selfishness, because I was like, wait, she said something that I had never heard of, which was not putting plastic in the dishwasher.
Yes.
Say something about that, because I know all of us who have Tupperware in various forms, which I know we should eventually replace with glass, we're putting that in the dishwasher because they're actually really hard to clean by hand wash, right? Especially, let's say you've put anything like spaghetti sauce or something like that in there, which maybe is very telling, right? That it's hard for it to get out of the plastic unless you put it in scalding hot water with other chemicals to boot to wash them. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, I actually do offer a workshop/course that covers all of this. So that is
Okay,
actually
great.
one of those topics about the spaghetti sauce. Like if anybody's ever had spaghetti sauce or any red tomato-based sauce in plastic, you can see that the plastic, it doesn't come out. And it basically is the sauce getting into the plastic and vice versa. And so it's kind of a chemical reaction and it kind of morphs into each other. And so it's not good because it's the plastic is getting then into the food as well. And so that's what happens when you heat them at high heat, like in the microwave or in a dishwasher. It breaks down and it breaks down into the microplastics that would then release back into the plastic that you're using, but also into the environment, into the water and all of that. And so it's not good. It will break down eventually. And then if you've ever used a plastic cutting board, which I admit we just recently within the last year got rid of because my husband loved them. And I realized I kept buying wooden cutting boards and I realized I wasn't using the plastic ones at all. But if they were available, everyone else was still using them. And so I just was like, okay, we need to get rid of these entirely because you could literally see knife marks and that is then releasing those microplastics into your food that you're then are eating. So
yeah, and my husband is actually a professional chef, and so he uses plastic cutting boards for work, and then we have a couple at home when we're cutting meat because he's, it's a big thing. You don't want it on the wood.
Right.
So what do you suggest for that person, right? Who's not wanting, is a carnivore, doesn't eat meat.
I get that.
So needs to prepare it and doesn't want to get themselves sick from the bacteria that might be left there. So what do you suggest?
And that was one of the reasons we kind of held on to some of the plastic cutting boards. Wood actually can be like a natural, like disinfectant with things like that. And you just hand wash it at high heat or whatever. And I've had no issue.
We've also put lemon water on ours. So I will actually we have a big cutting board and I'll take a lemon and just squirt the lemon and rub the lemon and just let it sit and kill the bacteria. I think vinegar might also probably work and not disrupt it just depends on what kind of wood we're talking about. So
I know that and I have never used them because I just haven't done it, but a lot of people will talk about glass cutting boards as well, which I know can then cause issues with the knives, but that is another alternative. If the plastic, like if you're like, we're not getting away from this plastic, then try to hand wash it. I would say putting them in the dishwasher really isn't great because all these microplastics that are breaking down, also it's getting into our water supply, which then is like these teeny tiny pieces that are just, you can't filter them out. And so then they're getting into what we're drinking, back into what the animals are drinking. I remember years ago, we were on the beach in Hawaii, this gorgeous beach. And I was just walking along. I love walking along the water. And I was shocked at the amount of tiny, tiny plastic pieces. I thought it was sand initially. And then I was like, oh no, they're like blue and green. And it was these tiny plastic pieces all mixed in with the sand. And I was like, this is horrifying. This is just this beautiful beach in Hawaii out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And there's plastic everywhere. So I'm definitely not perfect on that. It's definitely hard to avoid plastic.
Well, and it's virtually in everything. I mean, you go to any grocery store and you try to purchase something invariably
strawberries or
it's in plastic. And so it makes it really challenging to purchase things. But that's, I think, where your message of like, let's not be overwhelmed, do what you can.
Yes, absolutely. It's a progress over perfection kind of thing. There's no way to avoid it all. It's just not feasible in today's society. But instead of buying water bottles when you're on the go that are in plastic, bring a stainless steel water bottle with you and fill it up. There's water filling stations everywhere these days. Bring that instead. Try to eliminate that single-use plastic as much as possible when it comes to water, that kind of stuff. So if you're traveling or you're out on the go, that's all you have access to, of course. But maybe skip the buying the big cases of water unless your water is toxic to drink at home. You can do those reusable water bottles are great. I have the same one that I've had. I mean, it's probably been like 8 years. It's dented. I need to get a new one, but it's like, it's the perfect size. It doesn't even stand up straight. Still works. Clean.
Yeah. I can see a lot of people, especially, well, I don't know if it's especially with people with small children, but I recall that when my child was small, it was a big issue. Ziploc bags, right? I mean, talk about plastic everywhere. And the very least that I've done is I just try to, wash them. And so at least we're reusing them. But I do have concerns about the plastics getting into the food that that is being held in there.
I read something that said that nowadays, because there's so much plastic everywhere, we consume like a credit card's worth of plastic every year or something like that. I mean, it's a lot. And
That's a lot.
so plastic bags are another one that is a tricky battle in my household, but
Mhm.
I try to use stasher bags as much as
Yeah.
possible, especially if you're putting something in the refrigerator that's like a half an avocado or whatever it is that you're putting back in the refrigerator. I try to use the stasher bags. I definitely need to up it and buy more so that that's what everyone gravitates towards instead of Ziploc bags. So that is definitely a work in progress in our house, but I do try to reuse them as well as much as possible just to cut down on the waste that's out there. So I think there are ways that you can do it without feeling overwhelmed. Again, as you run out of things, or I mean, Costco has great deals, I think, on glass storage, or IKEA, even like glass storage things that are relatively inexpensive. You buy it once and you can have it for a really long time.
Right.
And a lot of those lids are plastic on some of those storage containers, but as long as you're not putting them in the microwave or they're not touching hot food, if I'm putting something hot and I just put it in the glass and then let it cool a little bit, and then I'll put it in the refrigerator and try not to let the food touch the plastic. But you do what you can.
Yeah. And by the way, stasher bags are made out of rubber, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, there's silicone, so
Silicone, maybe rubber, right? Less toxic substances. Yeah. So, and you talked a little bit about you have done some advocacy. What if people are interested? They don't want this to be the norm. They don't want plastics to be everywhere and everything. They don't want their skin and beauty products to contain 1,800 chemicals, especially since they're banned everywhere else. How can people maybe learn more about that and get involved?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I do. I have a course that people can take, and it's a 5-week thing, or they can do it at their own pace. It's 5 different topics each week. That course is available online, and each week comes with a handout and then the shopping guide as well. I have also a link that has products that I've picked out that I've kind of vetted ingredients, again, personal care products and things like that, with the like shopping links, so that, because that's part of the problem, right? It's like, what the heck do I buy?
Right.
And so I do offer that. And then I offer one-on-one work as well. But what I say, working with people one-on-one, but I feel like once people have the awareness, is just really start reading those labels. I know we didn't touch a whole lot on food, but it's the same type of thing. There are ingredients allowed in the United States that aren't allowed in other countries. And there's a big push right now. In fact, there's been a big, huge thing, Kellogg's, and a big petition that recently came out that a lot of advocates are trying to get some of the junky ingredients out of our products in the US. Because again, these same companies are making different products like in Europe, in Canada, because they have to. But here, they just are allowing them to come right through. So same thing with food. Read those ingredient labels, look for things that are real foods instead of all of these fake ingredients. And I feel like everyone will be a little bit better off. And so once you're kind of aware of that, I feel like it starts to get easier. It's a bit of a learning curve in the beginning, but it does start to get easier as you get more familiar with what to watch out for.
Yeah, and the food issue is for sure big. I know, especially among people who are interested in health, it's really fascinating to me that some of these food products contain so many things that are not good for us. So people who are really want to increase their protein, right? And they want to be in better shape. And so they buy all of these products, right?
Yep.
And we're all told we need to get a lot more protein than we've been getting. And yet, when you look at the label for these things, hardly anything seems to be actual food.
Right. Yeah. You want real ingredients. You want things like that you could make at home. I'm definitely not one that is like, oh my gosh, never eat processed or packaged food again, because that's not totally reality. We did that for a while. We had a health diagnosis in our family, and I did have to make everything from scratch, from bread to crackers to everything, for one of my kids. And it was hard and it's time consuming. And so thankfully, there are more food options nowadays that are just made with a couple ingredients, almond flour crackers that have salt and olive oil and whatever. Great. I'd rather buy that because it's easier than spending 4 hours making them that are going to be gone in 10 minutes. But it's challenging, and it's kind of on the consumer again to do the work. And so hopefully some of these trends, companies will wake up and be like, hey, people they don't want this anymore. It's mind boggling to me that these companies in the United States are allowed to have all these different versions. Like, how is this okay?
It is wild. And I mean, anyone who's been fortunate enough to be able to travel to other countries, let's say in Europe, anyone who might have had a food sensitivity
Mm-hmm.
will report that they don't have that same food sensitivity.
Yep. I am one of those people. Yep.
Yeah.
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 I have a lot of food sensitivities in the United States. A lot. And I didn't have them until I was in college in my 20s, so in the 90s. And our food shifted big time in the 90s. So a lot of times people will say, oh, I was eating this when I was a kid. It's different from the 70s and 80s and 60s, 50s, 60s. It's different. The food is different. And it's not. And it might be the same exact brand you've bought. And if you look at the labels of what it used to be and now, I mean, even buying peanut butter is challenging. And I know what to look for. And I'll reach for a jar that's on the shelf. And I'm like, wait, why does this one have palm oil when the one next to it just is peanuts and salt? You can't tell from the front a lot of times. So it is important for us to read those ingredients. And I still do. Anytime, how you were saying, protein powders or things like that, anytime somebody shares a new product or recommend something, the very first thing I do, whether it's a lipstick or a lotion or anything, food, I read the ingredient label every single time. And I might be a total minority on that. It might not be something that people do, but I feel like it should be something that people do because I want to know what it is. I try to avoid things that say natural flavors, which are kind of along the same lines of fragrance where the companies don't have to say what they are. So you don't really know. When we went through this autoimmune diagnosis in our family, some of the things that we couldn't buy anything that said natural flavors because they didn't disclose. We don't know what it is. We had to know exactly what it all was. And so I learned a lot through that as well. It takes us doing the work and it takes the consumer to switch the demand. If less people are buying it, hopefully the companies will start doing better.
Exactly. That seems to be the only way that they'll respond unless there's some sort of big, massive legislative change, which seems still a little bit far off at this point.
Yeah. I mean, I think it hopefully is getting there, but it takes the awareness, first of all, which is one of the things that I aim to do is just make people more aware and try not to do without that overwhelm. Thankfully, there are options of things that you can buy. And what I found is a lot of times you hear nowadays, especially in the news, is they'll tell us all these things, right? Like avoid this, don't do this, this causes this, but then what are we supposed to do? They don't really give you solutions. And so that's what I aim to do is help figure out those solutions of what do we do instead? What can we buy instead? I still fall for the labels. Sometimes these greenwash labels on products that they look totally great. And then you're like, wait, they're not at all. And I still fall for it. So it's challenging.
Yeah, it is challenging.
Yes.
So for people who are interested in some of your courses, they want to see your list of recommended products, all of that, how do they find out more about the types of offerings you have, whether they want to work with you one-on-one or take one of your courses?
Yeah, my business is called Better Health with Sarah. I have a website that's betterhealthwithsarah.com. On Instagram, it's the same thing. I'm on LinkedIn, TikTok a tiny bit, Facebook. Usually Instagram is probably the most active where I am. But yeah, people can contact me that way. It has my info on my website of how to do this course and, also set up an appointment to do one-on-one work. And yeah, there's a spot to sign up on my website to receive my emails, which are about once a week, once every other week. And it gives you some free tips of what to do in your home to clean up your environment.
I'll make sure to put those in the show notes. One last thing I realized I didn't ask you. I mean, there's so much here, and I know you gave some really good tips about how not to get overwhelmed, but is there anything else you do other than slowly transitioning? Anything that you do on the daily to keep yourself sane, happy, healthy, mentally well?
Personally, I try to get outside as much as possible, whether it's taking a walk 10 minutes or whatever. We live thankfully by a river, and anytime I can see water, it makes me happy. Today, I took a little bit longer walk. Sometimes it's really long. Sometimes I only have 10, 15 minutes. That's great. That's all I need. Or just sitting outside and reading instead, or just being outside. People talk about grounding or walking around the grass barefoot. Just that type of stuff just makes me happy. Try to limit news consumption, which is funny. Sometimes it can get really overwhelming. So I try to limit that, or trying to be better about curating social media. What are the things I actually want to see? Positive things and that type of stuff, I think is really helpful because again, it can get super overwhelming, but just taking those steps as you run out of something or, the things you use the most at home, like making sure that your drinking glasses are out of glass instead of plastic and just making those switches, it really can help impact your health over time.
Right. And I guess I would add, well, one sort of offset or side note, and then also something to add, which is you're not alone as somebody
Mhm.
who's used to be in media. Dan Harris, who has the 10% Happier app, used to be an ABC news anchor
Mhm.
for many years. And he also suggested to limit news
Mhm.
consumption, to be very
Mhm.
smart about it. Right.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting that you both had that. And
It's challenging for someone like me that likes to know what's going on. It is hard, like sometimes, but sometimes I'm like, okay, I need to just like go take a walk or like do whatever, do something else that makes you happy or do a puzzle. I don't know, something
right,
that just
something.
like,
Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
you can really go down the rabbit hole, not only just with the news, but even in this area, right,
yeah.
of self-care and making
Mhm.
sure that your products are safe, that you and your family are using. You can go down the rabbit hole and be like, oh my God, everything's terrible. We're all going to die.
Totally.
Right. And so I think when we're starting to feel that way, the move is maybe to pull back a little, right?
Mhm.
Do what we
Absolutely.
can, get outside, like you said, spend some time maybe reading or doing something else so that we don't get pulled into the chaos of feeling overwhelmed by all the bad things that they truly are out there, but there are also some really good things, right? So
Right. For sure.
we can focus on, oh, there are companies that are out there that are actually doing really good things, right, in this space, that are doing it for the right reasons, and they're being transparent, and they want to put products out there that are healthy for us to use. And
Yeah.
they
Companies that are B corporations are really good
Mhm.
ones. Like if you're like, I just don't know where to start, there's great B corps that they take into account people, planet, profit in an equal
Right.
amount. So it's not just all profit driven, and they take all that into account. So those are a great way to start too. Is like, oh, I'm gonna go with and again, things that you can change, like this water bottle I've had. I'm literally like doesn't stand up straight anymore. Why am I still using this? Because it's fine. Like
Right. Still works.
still works. Yeah, I've had it literally probably 8 years. So, it doesn't have to be overwhelming. Just take
Mhm.
those little steps initially and, reduce those exposures where you can. And again, it's progress over perfection. There's no way to completely eliminate, because that's a whole other thing that can cause a lot of anxiety and stress that you don't want, because that also has an impact on your health. So it's impossible to make it be perfect these days, but just think about what you're buying, what you're consuming, what you're bringing into your home, that can be helpful.
Right. I love that, progress rather than perfection.
Mhm.
Anything that we didn't get to talk about that you were hoping to talk about?
I know we didn't do a deep dive on my breast cancer journey, but that's a whole other topic. But
Yeah.
my key takeaway from that is to be your own advocate.
Hmm.
And well, I found a lump, went into my doctor. She dismissed it initially
Mm.
and basically said I was too young, and, just totally dismissed
Wow.
the feelings of fatigue that I was having, all these other things. I felt like something was off in my body, but I didn't know what. And she just dismissed it all and just said, oh, you're too young for all that. But on the other hand, it could be perimenopause. Again, I was 42 at the time. So I waited a couple months and lump was still there. And I went to another doctor and she kind of said the same thing, in that she didn't think it
Hmm.
was a big deal. She thought it was a benign cyst. And so I didn't think it was a big deal, but she said, hey, you can go get an ultrasound if you want, just to rule out anything. So a couple more weeks went by and I got an ultrasound and was blindsided in that appointment because the tech got really quiet and then brought in a radiologist, and they both started saying, like, you need a biopsy, you need a mammogram, you need all these things right away. And I was like, what's going on? It's supposed to be
Yeah.
nothing. And so, did the biopsy 2 days later. It was stage two, found out it was stage two, grade 3 invasive ductal carcinoma, which then went into a lumpectomy. And then, like I said, chemo, radiation, oophorectomy at the end that then put me into menopause at age 43. And yeah, so I'm big on being your own advocate. And it really kind of ties into,
Yes.
again, what you're purchasing, what you're choosing. Like, we're kind of in it for ourselves. We have to watch out for ourselves. And so if something feels off in your body, or something is you want an answer to, that you're just not, if you're getting dismissed by it from a doctor or whatever, just keep at it. I'm
Mhm.
glad that I didn't just ignore that, because 2 doctors weren't concerned of what I had. And all the blood tests I had at the time were allegedly normal, which is also kind of frightening, because I was like,
Right.
how is this possible that it's completely these normal blood tests, yet I fully had cancer? So that was, again, my journey to be like, okay, this is a wake up call. This is like, what lessons can I learn from this, and all of that. Definitely let's be in the moment type deal and
Right.
take one day at a time, which was something I kind of often struggled with, that my dad was always like, Instead of getting anxious about things, just one day at a time. Not to say that that's perfect now, but it's something I work on. And okay, I can't control this. I couldn't control all the things that I face. You get thrown into appointments and all these stressful things. So it's something like that, like awareness, all this talk about breast cancer awareness. And my aim is prevention. Let's prevent people from getting there in the first place, because sadly, the numbers of breast cancer diagnosis is going up exponentially. I've had 8 friends since my diagnosis be diagnosed as well. 8, that's just in a 6.5-year span. That's a lot. It's a lot. Like people I know personally that I can text, it's like, this is crazy. Real friends, like they'll text me and be like, oh my gosh, can we talk? And I got diagnosed. What my goal is with my business to help prevent people from facing this stuff in the first place, not just breast cancer, but other things. But also if you do face it, how can you help reduce that toxic load on your body? I did do some integrative and naturopathic things along with my conventional treatments, which I think definitely helped my healing. And so, that's all tailored to different individuals. It's not just a one size fits all for that. But that is my big takeaway, is always just be your own advocate, like read those labels of what you're purchasing and what you're eating. I ask questions all the time. I'm the super annoying one at a restaurant. I'm asking questions about, does this have dairy? Does this have whatever things that I can't eat here? And so, yeah, I mean, it really is. It kind of really comes down to that. Just be your own advocate. And, I'm glad that I didn't ignore. I'm glad I didn't go with both doctors saying, this isn't a concern, because it was.
Right. Yeah. Go with your gut for sure. And your gut was telling you that there's something not right here and I shouldn't feel this way. And this thing is still here. And I think it's still a problem. And I think that's really important right now for people to recognize, because we look at doctors, we forget that they're human too. Right. And these doctors obviously did. Right. And thankfully you listened to yourself. And then thankfully also the tech and the radiologist were like, yeah, that's the problem. Right. And I like how you led that back to, let's see if we can prevent this, not just treat it, but obviously also it can help in the treatment to reduce the toxic load that we have. And it's such an important message. And I think I'd love to have you back on the show and maybe talk a little bit more in depth about the medical gaslighting that you had experienced, as well as your journey and what worked best for you. I think people will want to hear about that.
I'm totally an open book when it comes to all that, because I feel like it can help, if I can help people, if I can help people prevent anything, or, just, I had so many people I turned to when I was going through that. And I think that's just a common thing, right? You turn to those people that have already experienced it, and it was so helpful. And so anytime I can help other people do that, I'm always happy to do that. But I mean, thankfully, the doctor, she called me after she saw the diagnosis, like it came across her desk. She called and she was like, what is going on? I'm like, you tell me, you missed it. And it was because of my age, really, that she dismissed it. And now, unfortunately, people are they're younger and younger and younger. And so I'm hoping doctors are taking this seriously. I did hear through another friend who was also a patient of the same doctor that she has changed how she does things. And she's taking it all very seriously, as they all should. Right. And so it was pretty wild time, just even in that ultrasound. I had to go pick my kids up in an hour. Thought this was supposed to be just a routine nothing, because why was I concerned? Had no thought in my head that it was cancer. I knew I wanted to know what it was, this lump that appeared basically overnight, but I didn't think it was cancer because 2 doctors told me it was nothing.
Right. Yeah, important. And I'm glad to hear that the doctor has since changed the way that she's looking at this, and hopefully more doctors will do the same. I really appreciate you sharing that. I think that's an important message. And I appreciate all that you're doing to try to educate those of us who are out there in the world wanting to live a healthier, happier life, and to bring that to our families as well. So I'm looking forward to having another conversation with you and to people getting to know what you have to offer and how you can help them. And so I'll make sure to post those all in the show notes, and hopefully people will reach out to you and you can help them as you've helped me here today. I really appreciate it.
Always happy to help. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you. It's been really lovely to have you, and I know I'll be having you again soon.
Thanks.
Hey, everybody, it's Melissa, and I'm wondering if you all can relate. Have you ever caught yourself procrastinating, or maybe doubting your abilities, or maybe you have a black belt inner critic like I do or have had that wants to sabotage your every move with judgment and perfectionism expectations? might keep you stuck, it might keep you anxious and away from your full potential. The Positive Intelligence Program, PQ, is a powerful 6-week journey designed to help you quiet those saboteurs, embrace positivity, and find flow in your life. Through daily practices and weekly focuses, we'll work together to build your mental fitness. The PQ app will guide you every step of the way and support you, and you'll be supported either by myself in a one-on-one or in a small group of like-minded individuals where you can share insights and progress. So reach out, contact me at info@thefullymindful.com to find out how we can work together one-on-one or in a small group today.